The cafe was quiet, except for the hum of conversations and the clinking of cups. Ethan stood in line, scrolling through his phone while waiting to order. That's when he noticed her, a young woman sitting by the window, counting coins on the table. Her face fell as she realized she didn't have enough. She glanced around nervously, then started packing up her things, ready to leave without eating. Ethan hesitated. He wasn't rich himself. He worked 2 jobs just to get by. But something about her struggle tugged at his heart. Before he could overthink it, he stepped forward. "I've got this," he said softly to the cashier, nodding toward her table. The girl looked up, startled, as the cashier told her the meal was covered. Ethan gave her a small smile before turning away quickly. "Wait!" she called out. But he was already gone, disappearing into the crowd outside. She stared after him, clutching her bag tightly. Who was that man? And why had he helped her without asking for anything in return? Little did she know, his simple act of kindness would change both their lives forever. The girl sat alone at the cafe table, her meal untouched as she replayed the moment in her mind. The stranger had vanished before she could even say thank you. His face was already fading from memory. Dark hair, a kind smile, and eyes that seemed to carry their own weight of worries. But who was he? And why would someone go out of their way to help a complete stranger like that? Her name was Sophia Hartwell, or at least it used to be. These days, she went by Sophie, living quietly and blending into crowds while traveling the world. As a billionaire heiress, she'd grown tired of people pretending to care about her just for her money. So, she left her old life behind, choosing simplicity over luxury. Yet, here she was, touched deeply by a man who likely had little to spare but gave anyway. It made her wonder. When was the last time someone showed her such genuine kindness without expecting anything in return? That night, back at her rented apartment, Sophia couldn't stop thinking about him. She pulled out her sketchbook, a habit she'd kept since childhood, and drew his face from memory. Something about his selflessness stayed with her, lingering long after the cafe lights dimmed. She decided to find him, not because she owed him something, but because she wanted to know more about the person who reminded her there was still goodness in the world. The next day, she returned to the cafe, hoping to catch another glimpse of him. But he wasn't there. Instead, the barista only remembered that he came in occasionally, always polite and soft-spoken. Maybe I'll see him again someday, Sophia thought, walking away. What she didn't realize was that fate had other plans. Days later, Sophia found herself at a local park during a charity event. She had been invited by a friend who knew nothing of her true identity, and she decided to attend simply to enjoy the fresh air and music. The sun was bright, casting golden light over booths selling handmade crafts, food trucks lining the pathways, and children laughing as they played games. As she wandered through the crowd, someone bumped into her accidentally, spilling coffee onto her shirt. "Oh no! I'm so sorry!" a familiar voice exclaimed. Sophia froze. That voice, it was him, the man from the cafe. "It's okay," she said quickly, brushing off the stain. "It's just a little coffee." When she looked up, their eyes met, and recognition sparked in both of them. Ethan blinked, unsure if it was really her. "Wait, do I know you?" he asked cautiously. Sophia smiled nervously. "You might not remember, but you helped me once, at a cafe. You paid for my meal." Ethan's face lit up with surprise. "That was you? Wow, small world." They stood there awkwardly for a moment before Ethan gestured toward a nearby bench. "Do you want to sit down? We can talk." Over the next hour, they shared stories about their lives. Ethan spoke about working 2 jobs to support his family after his father fell ill. Sophia listened intently, moved by his resilience and humility. In turn, she told him about traveling to escape the pressures of her old life, but carefully avoided mentioning her wealth. "You're different," Ethan said suddenly, breaking the flow of conversation. "Different how?" Sophia asked, tilting her head curiously. "I don't know," Ethan admitted with a shrug. "Most people I meet are either too busy or too caught up in themselves. But you seem real." Sophia felt her cheeks flush. No one had ever described her that way, not in years. For the first time, she felt truly seen, not for her money or status, but for who she was beneath all the layers she'd built around herself. By the end of the day, they exchanged numbers, promising to meet again soon. Neither realized yet how much this chance encounter would mean, or how quickly their lives would intertwine. Over the next few weeks, Ethan and Sophia grew closer. They met for coffee, strolled through parks, and talked about everything under the sun. Ethan loved how easy it was to be around her. She listened intently, laughed at his jokes, and never judged him for his struggles. For Sophia, being with Ethan felt like stepping into a world untouched by the complications of wealth and fame. He didn't care about designer clothes or fancy cars. He cared about kindness, hard work, and honesty. It was refreshing and terrifying. But as their bond deepened, small clues began to surface that made Ethan curious. One day, while waiting for her outside a bookstore, he noticed Sophia stepping out of a sleek black car driven by a chauffeur. She waved casually as if nothing was unusual, but Ethan frowned. "Sophia," he said later, trying to sound casual, "do you always take private cars?" She hesitated, caught off guard. "Not always," she replied quickly. "Sometimes I just prefer convenience." Ethan nodded, though doubt lingered in his mind. Then there were other moments. A glimpse of an expensive watch peeking out from her sleeve, the way waiters treated her with unusual deference, the polished accent that slipped out when she least expected it. Still, Ethan pushed those thoughts aside. What did it matter if she came from money? It wasn't her fault, and it didn't change the fact that she was one of the most genuine people he'd ever met. Meanwhile, Sophia wrestled with guilt. Every time Ethan opened up about his challenges, she felt like a fraud. How could she complain about trivial things when he worked so hard just to get by? Yet, every time she considered telling him the truth, fear stopped her. What if he pulled away? What if he saw her differently once he knew? One evening, as they sat on a bench overlooking the city lights, Ethan turned to her. "You know," he said softly, "I feel like I can tell you anything, but sometimes, I wonder, do you trust me enough to share everything about yourself?" His words hit her like a punch to the gut. She looked away, tears pricking her eyes. "I want to," she whispered, "but I'm scared." "Of what?" Ethan asked gently. "That you'll see me differently," she admitted. "That you won't like who I really am." Before she could say more, a group of photographers appeared out of nowhere, cameras flashing wildly. Sophia froze, panic rising in her chest. "Miss Hartwell," one shouted. "Can we get a comment? Are you dating anyone special these days?" Ethan stared at her, stunned. "Hartwell? As in?" "Yes," Sophia said quietly, tears streaming down her face. "I'm Sophia Hartwell, the billionaire." The paparazzi swarmed around them, shouting questions and snapping photos. Ethan stood frozen, his mind racing as he pieced everything together. Sophia, the woman he'd grown to care for, wasn't just some traveler trying to escape her old life. She was the Sophia Hartwell, the billionaire heiress whose face had been splashed across magazines worldwide. "Is this true?" Ethan asked, his voice trembling with a mix of confusion and hurt. Sophia nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Yes," she whispered, "but I didn't lie to you about who I am, not really. Everything we've shared has been real. The only thing I hid was my last name." Ethan took a step back, running a hand through his hair. He felt betrayed, but at the same time, he couldn't ignore the sincerity in her eyes. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" he asked, his tone softer now. "I was scared," Sophia admitted, her voice breaking. "Scared that you'd treat me differently if you knew. People always do. They either want my money or resent me for it. But you saw me as a person, and I didn't want to lose that." Ethan sighed deeply, his emotions swirling. On one hand, he understood why she kept her secret. On the other, it stung that she hadn't trusted him enough to share the truth. "I need time to think," he said finally, turning away. Sophia watched him leave, her heart shattering into pieces. She had known this moment might come, but she hadn't expected it to hurt so much. That night, Ethan paced his small apartment, replaying their conversations in his head. He thought about how kind she had been, how genuine their connection felt. Was her wealth really the most important thing? Or was he letting pride get in the way? The next morning, he sent her a text. "Can we talk?" They met at the same park where they'd reconnected days earlier. This time, the atmosphere was heavy with tension. "I'm sorry," Sophia began, her voice shaky. "I never meant to deceive you. You've shown me what it means to be truly kind, and I'll never forget that." Ethan looked at her, seeing past the fame and fortune to the person underneath. "I won't pretend it doesn't bother me," he said honestly. "But I also can't deny how much you mean to me. If we're going to move forward, though, there can't be any more secrets." Sophia nodded, relief washing over her. "No more secrets," she promised. "From now on, you'll know everything." For the first time since the incident, Ethan smiled. "Good, because I don't care about your money, Sophia. Care about you." In the weeks that followed, Ethan and Sophia worked to rebuild their relationship on a foundation of honesty and trust. Sophia introduced him to her world. Not the glitz and glamour of red carpets, but the quiet moments where she could just be herself. She showed him her favorite books, shared stories about her childhood, and even took him to visit her family estate, which felt more like a museum than a home. Ethan, in turn, opened up about his dreams and fears, letting her see the parts of his life he usually kept hidden. Together, they discovered that their differences didn't divide them. They enriched their bond. One evening, as they sat together under the stars, Sophia turned to Ethan with a soft smile. "You've changed my life," she said. "Before I met you, I thought I'd lost sight of who I really was. But you reminded me that kindness matters more than wealth, and love is worth fighting for." Ethan reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. "And you've shown me that people aren't always what they seem. You're not just a billionaire. You're someone who cares deeply, who sees the good in everyone, and who's brave enough to live authentically." As the days turned into months, their love grew stronger, rooted in mutual respect and understanding. They decided to build a future together, one where neither had to hide or pretend. Whether volunteering at local shelters or traveling the world, they embraced every moment side by side. One day, while walking through the same park where they'd first reconnected, Ethan stopped suddenly. Turning to Sophia, he took both her hands in his. "You've given me so much," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "Will you let me spend the rest of my life giving back to you?" Tears welled up in Sophia's eyes as she nodded. "Yes," she whispered, "1,000 times yes." As they kissed beneath the golden sunset, surrounded by laughter and music from the nearby crowds, they knew they'd found something rare and beautiful. A love that transcended money, status, and secrets. And in each other they had found home.